Hi there. This is Dr. John Whitcomb talking about nitric oxide. You may have heard about it, but you probably haven't. And I'm going to contend it is the fulcrum of life. It's the pivot on which our bodies turn. And we need to know about it because, in fact, knowing how to test your own nitric oxide might be one of the most important things you do for your personal health. Now, its discovery back in the early 90s was enough. It was called the molecule of the year, and it was enough to get a Nobel Prize awarded to its discoverers, mostly around vascular health. And there's pretty good evidence that you develop coronary artery disease because your nitric oxide drops. And it's the loss of nitric oxide that makes your arteries more rigid and gets them damaged and starts the process. And so replacing nitric oxide makes them stretchier. Okay, so that's pretty good evidence. But it actually plays roles in many other things. And we may review those in the weeks ahead as we explore this. But I want to just introduce the first concepts. Concept number one. We lose about 10% of its production capacity per year. 10 to 12%. So by the time you're 40, you've lost about half. By the time you're 70, you've lost 3/4. Oh dear. That's a problem. That's when heart disease takes off, is in 60s and 70s. Okay, that's concept number one. Concept number two is there's a nitrogen cycle in your body. And that cycle goes as you get nitrates from abundantly in vegetables. And nitrates are converted by this, they get concentrated in your saliva. And they get converted by the bacteria in the crypts of your tongue to nitrite, which is quite a different molecule. And then that, when you swallow food, gets converted in your stomach if the pH is below 4. Normal pH in the gut is 2, so 4 is okay. It gets converted to nitric oxide. And nitric oxide virtually anywhere in your body has an endocrine effect all over your body, a salutary benefit. Okay, that's the nitrogen cycle. Now, the nitrate you eat that goes into your gut, gets absorbed in your colon and gets into your system and gets concentrated in your salivary glands. So the nitrate keeps being fed back into you. Now there's concept number 3. World Health Organization said nitrates and your poison, you shouldn't be having them in foods, and that's probably nonsense. And part of the reason for believing that is that, do you know that mother's milk is one of the highest food sources of nitrates? Evolution would not have been made it dangerous for us. I think there's been a huge misunderstanding. In fact, the literature that supports cancer and nitrates is pretty weak. This is one of those things that have been passed on for eons and maybe is in error because we certainly concentrate it in our salivary glands and make it in our mouths. Concept number 3. Guess what happens when you take mouthwash and kill all the bacteria in your mouth? You think you're doing yourself a big favor? It takes about 10 days. There's research showing that in dental students, put them on mouthwash every day and their blood pressure is higher in just a week. Over 100 million Americans are taking mouthwash every day, and that wipes out your ability to make nitric oxide, NO. Concept number 4. You need an acid stomach to convert it into nitric oxide, nitrites into nitric oxide. How many Americans are on PPIs that get the pH of their stomach to 7, neutral, no acid at all? Do you know there's now research showing that if you take PPIs, within a couple of years, we can show 20-30% increase in coronary artery disease? PPIs are not your friend when it comes to nitric oxide. So we have two things that we're shooting ourselves in the foot because we haven't understood this physiology. That's what I'm starting with. You have to understand, we can't use mouthwash. Okay, well, just as a teaser, where do you get nitrates and nitrite from? Well, there's two sources. In your blood, we can convert L-arginine, the amino acid, and that goes through the citrulline cycle, and that makes nitric oxide. But unfortunately, taking a supplement of L-arginine has not been shown to improve your nitric oxide level. But two, you can eat vegetables, particularly green vegetables, particularly leafy green vegetables. And that explains the DASH diet and explains the Mediterranean diet. Crete, where they eat more than 50% of their food from greens, is the epitome of the Mediterranean diet. The DASH diet, you can show people have 5 servings of vegetables every day, have very high levels of nitric acid, NO, in their blood. Now we know why the Mediterranean diet works. It may not be the olive oil, it may not be the other elements, it's the green vegetables that raises your nitric oxide. And all three theories of aging, 1, senescence of stem cells, 2, oxidation of critical components, and 3, shortening of telomeres. All 3 of them have their mechanisms of action circle around the various forms of nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is the fulcrum of life, and we learn how to measure it. What will work for me? You can get on Amazon and you can buy nitric oxide measuring devices, little sticks, and you can measure it. You can go to any health food store and you can buy all sorts of supplements that raise your nitric oxide, and they work. You can take beet juice supplements, that's a particularly high source of nitric oxide, and show that your nitric oxide went up. You want your level to be at the top of the scale. You don't want to be at the bottom. Measure yours, get the measuring strips, get your nitric oxide up, have spinach salad for supper. Dr. John Whitcomb for News and Nutrition. Nitric oxide is the fulcrum of life, and that's the truth.